The black waitress spent her last penny helping a frozen old lady on the street, unaware the woman was the mother of the Korean Mafia boss. February in Chicago was brutal. The kind of cold that cut through layers of clothing like they were tissue paper, that turned breath into clouds of frost, that made every step outside feel like a small act of defiance against nature itself. Megan Clark had lived here for 3 years now, and she still wasn't used to it. Wasn't sure she'd ever be. 26 years old, working the closing shift at Sullivan's Diner on the South Side, walking home because she'd sold her car last month when rent came due and her bank account came up short. The bus had stopped running an hour ago. Budget cuts, they said, like poor people didn't need to get home after 10 p.m. So she walked, bundled in a coat that was warm enough for Atlanta, but laughable for Chicago, counting the blocks until she could collapse in her studio apartment. 5 blocks. Just 5 more blocks, and she'd be home. Could make ramen with the last packet in her cupboard, could wrap herself in every blanket she owned, could try not to think about the fact that her bank account had exactly $12.37 until Friday's paycheck. The street was empty. Everyone with sense was inside, huddled against the cold. Wind howled between buildings, carrying snow that stung Megan's face like tiny needles. She pulled her inadequate coat tighter and kept walking, head down, focused on putting one foot in front of the other. That's when she saw her. An elderly woman sitting on a bus stop bench, no coat, just a thin cardigan over what looked like nice clothes. The kind you wore to dinner parties, not to freeze to death on Chicago street corners. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, and even from 20 feet away, Megan could see she was shaking. Every instinct screamed at Megan to keep walking. It was freezing. She was exhausted. She had $12 to her name and 4 days until payday. Getting involved with a stranger's crisis would only complicate her already precarious life. But Megan's feet stopped anyway, because she'd been raised better than to walk past someone who needed help, even when helping was the last thing she could afford to do. "Ma'am," Megan approached slowly, keeping her voice gentle. "Are you okay?" The woman looked up, and Megan's breath caught. She was Korean, maybe 65 or 70, with elegant features and eyes that were sharp despite the obvious cold affecting her, and she was trembling so badly her teeth chattered. I'm fine," the woman said, English heavily accented but clear. "Just resting, waiting for bus." "Ma'am, the buses stopped running an hour ago, and you're freezing." Megan crouched down to her level, getting a better look. The woman's lips had a bluish tint. Her fingers were white where they gripped each other. This wasn't just cold. This was hypothermia territory. "I didn't know. I thought—" The woman's voice trailed off, confusion clouding her eyes. "I had wallet. I had money for cab, but I can't find it. I looked everywhere, but it's gone." Megan's social work training kicked in. Assess the situation, identify the crisis, determine intervention. "Where do you live? Can I call someone for you?" "My son. I should call my son." The woman fumbled for a phone that wasn't there, patting pockets with increasing distress. "But my phone was in my wallet. Everything was in my wallet." Okay, it's all right. Let's figure this out." Megan pulled out her own phone. Ancient cracked screen, but it worked. "What's your son's number?" The woman stared at the phone, then at Megan, then back at the phone. I can't remember. It's in my phone. I never memorized." Tears welled in her eyes and she looked suddenly fragile, lost. "I'm sorry, I'm so stupid. I should have memorized it." "You're not stupid. Nobody memorizes numbers anymore." Megan sat on the bench beside her, mind racing through options. "What about your address? If I can get you home, your son will be there, right? Penthouse, downtown, the woman's brow furrowed. "I can't remember the name. The tall building with the doorman. Kim knows me. Kim will let me in." Downtown. That was at least 30 blocks away, maybe more. And a penthouse meant this woman came from money, serious money. But without ID, without a way to prove who she was, no doorman was letting anyone in at this hour. Megan looked at the woman shivering beside her, thought about the $12 in her account, Thought about the fact that a cab to downtown would cost at least $20, probably more. Thought about her grandmother's voice. Baby, you take care of people. That's what we do. We take care of each other. Okay, Megan said. Decision made before logic could interfere. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to get you warm first. Then we'll figure out how to get you home. She pulled off her coat, the only real coat she owned, bought secondhand but still her most valuable possession, and wrapped it around the elderly woman's shoulders. No, the woman protested weakly. You'll freeze. I'm young. I can handle it. You've been out here too long already. Megan stood, immediately feeling the cold bite through her thin work uniform. Come on. There's a 24-hour convenience store 2 blocks up. We'll get you warm, get some hot coffee in you, and figure out the next step. She helped the woman to her feet, noticing how unsteady she was, how the cold had affected her coordination. They walked slowly, Megan supporting her weight, feeling the wind cut through her uniform like it was nothing. The convenience store was a beacon of fluorescent light and artificial warmth. The clerk, a tired-looking guy in his 20s, barely glanced up as they entered. Megan guided the woman to a seat near the coffee machine and immediately went to pour 2 cups. Here, she said, wrapping the woman's frozen hands around the cup. Drink this slowly. It'll help. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the woman sipping coffee, color slowly returning to her face. Megan's mind worked through options. $12. A cab downtown would cost more than that. The L train had stopped running. Walking was impossible. The woman could barely stand. What's your name? Megan asked gently. Park High 1, but people call me Helen. The woman's English was getting clearer as she warmed up. And you are? Megan Clark. I work at the diner down the street. Sullivan's. Megan, Helen repeated, testing the name. You're very kind. Most people would have walked past. Most people probably had more sense than to get involved, Megan admitted, but my grandmother raised me better than that. Helen smiled, something warm breaking through the fear and confusion. Your grandmother sounds wise, like my mother was. She always said, take care of each other. That's what makes us human. My grandma said the same thing. Megan felt a connection forming, recognition of shared values across different cultures. Helen, I need to be honest with you. I don't have enough money for a cab to downtown. I've got $12, and that's not going to cut it. But if you can remember any details, a building name, a street, anything, maybe I can help you figure out how to contact your son. Helen's face fell. I'm being such a burden. I can wait here until morning. Call the police, maybe. They can help. At 10:30 at night in February, after you've already been hypothermic? No way. Megan made a decision that was probably stupid but felt necessary. I live 4 blocks from here. You can stay with me tonight. It's not much. Tiny studio, kind of a mess, but it's warm and safe. In the morning, when you're thinking clearer, we'll figure out how to get you home. I can't impose. You're not imposing. You're accepting help from someone who's offering it. Megan stood, finishing her coffee. Come on, let's get you somewhere you can actually rest. The walk to Megan's apartment was slow and careful. Helen was steadier now, coffee and warmth helping, but still weak. Megan kept one arm around her, supporting her weight, feeling the cold bite deeper with every step. Her building was exactly as unimpressive as she'd warned. Old, paint peeling, front door that didn't lock properly. They climbed 4 flights of stairs, Helen breathing hard by the 3rd floor, and finally reached Megan's studio. Home sweet home, Megan said with forced cheer, unlocking the door to reveal her tiny world. 1 room serving as bedroom, living room, and kitchen. Bathroom barely bigger than a closet. Secondhand furniture and thrift store decorations, trying to make it feel like more than just poverty with walls. But it was clean, and warm, and safe. Sit, Megan instructed, guiding Helen to the only comfortable chair. A worn armchair Megan had rescued from a curb. I'm going to make you some tea, get you some real food. She busied herself in the kitchen area, hyper-aware of how little she had to offer. The cupboards were basically empty. 1 packet of ramen, some tea bags, a can of soup that was probably expired. The fridge held milk that was questionable, and some leftover rice from 3 days ago. Megan heated the soup, made tea, brought both to Helen along with the warmest blanket she owned. It's not much, but it's hot. Helen accepted it with trembling hands, and when she looked up at Megan, there were tears in her eyes. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. I could be anyone. You're someone who needed help. That's all that matters. Megan sat on the floor back against the bed. My grandma used to say that we're all just one bad day away from needing kindness from strangers. Today was your bad day. Tomorrow might be mine. Your grandmother raised you well. She tried. Died 2 years ago. But I like to think she'd be proud. The familiar ache of loss settled in Megan's chest. Anyway, you eat that soup, drink that tea, and we'll figure out the rest tomorrow. I feel like I should tell you something, Helen said quietly, about who I am. So you understand? Unless it affects whether you're safe to have in my apartment, it can wait until morning. Megan smiled tiredly. Right now, you're just Helen, someone who had a really bad night and needed help. The rest doesn't matter. But Helen shook her head. It matters because my son, when he finds out what happened, when he discovers I was lost and alone and you helped me, he'll want to thank you properly. And I need you to understand that his gratitude can be overwhelming. Something in her tone made Megan pay attention. Your son is protective, very, and powerful. And sometimes his way of showing gratitude can be intimidating to people who don't know him. Helen's expression was complicated, love and worry mixing. But he's a good man. Under all the reputation, under everything people say about him, he's good. Helen, I appreciate the warning, but honestly, I'm not worried about your son thanking me. I'm just glad you're safe. Megan stood, stretching muscles that ached from the long shift and the stress. You can have the bed. I'll take the floor. Absolutely not. This is your home. And you're my guest. Plus, I'm 26 and used to sleeping on floors from college. You need the bed more than I do. She pulled out extra blankets, made a nest on the floor that would be uncomfortable but survivable. No arguments. Get some sleep. We'll sort everything out in the morning. Helen looked like she wanted to protest, but exhaustion was winning. She finished her soup, let Megan help her to the bed, and within minutes was asleep. The deep, heavy sleep of someone who'd pushed their body past its limits. Megan lay on her makeshift bed on the floor, staring at the ceiling, replaying the night's events. She'd just spent her last bit of financial security on coffee for a stranger, had brought someone she didn't know into her home, had given up her bed and her coat and her peace of mind. Her checking account now had exactly $2.37 after buying that coffee. Friday's paycheck felt impossibly far away. But looking at Helen sleeping peacefully, no longer shaking with cold, no longer lost and afraid, Megan couldn't bring herself to regret it. You better be proud of me, Grandma, she whispered into the dark. Megan woke to the smell of food cooking. For a moment she was confused. She didn't have food to cook. Then memory returned. Helen, the frozen woman. The impossibly kind but financially stupid decision to help. She sat up, muscles protesting from a night on the floor, and found Helen in her tiny kitchen area, somehow making breakfast from ingredients that shouldn't exist. Where did you get food? Megan asked, voice rough with sleep. Helen turned, looking remarkably better after a night's sleep. I found rice, some eggs in the back of your refrigerator that were still good. And I walked to the convenience store this morning and asked if they would let me borrow against a promise of repayment. The boy from last night was kind. He gave me basics. You told a convenience store clerk you'd pay him back later and he just believed you? Helen's smile was mysterious. I can be very persuasive when necessary, and I promised I would have my son repay him within hours. Something about the way I said it must have been convincing. Megan had a feeling there was more to that story, but her stomach growling interrupted further questions. Well, whatever you did, that smells amazing. They ate together. Simple Korean breakfast food that Helen had improvised from almost nothing. And it was delicious, warm, and comforting, in a way that made Megan's tiny apartment feel less like poverty and more like home. I need to call my son, Helen said as they finished eating. Can I use your phone? Of course. Megan handed it over, watching as Helen dialed a number with steady fingers. Clearly, her memory was back. The conversation was in rapid Korean, Helen's voice shifting between relief and what sounded like apologetic explanation. Even without understanding the words, Megan could hear the love in Helen's tone, the way she was reassuring someone who was clearly worried. Helen hung up, handed the phone back. He's coming. He'll be here in 20 minutes. He wants to thank you personally. He doesn't need to do that. I'm just glad you're safe. Megan, Helen said seriously, taking her hand, you saved my life last night. I was hypothermic, losing coherence. Without your help, I would have frozen to death on that bench. My son understands that, and he wants to express his gratitude properly. Something in the way she said properly made Megan nervous. Helen, I really don't need anything. I just did what anyone should do. But you're the one who did it, not anyone else. You. Helen's grip tightened. Please let him thank you. It's important to him, to both of us. Megan couldn't exactly refuse, so she nodded, trying not to think about how she looked. Still in yesterday's work uniform, hair a mess, apartment tiny and shabby. 20 minutes later, exactly on time, there was a knock on her door. Megan opened it, and her breath caught. The man standing in her doorway was stunning, tall for a Korean man, maybe 6'1", dressed in an expensive coat over a perfectly tailored suit, with sharp features and dark eyes that immediately found his mother and flooded with relief. 28, maybe 30, with the kind of presence that commanded attention without trying. Iyama, he said, moving past Megan like she wasn't there, going straight to Helen and pulling her into a tight embrace. He spoke in rapid Korean, checking on her, Megan assumed, making sure she was really okay. Helen responded, patting his back in that universal mother gesture of reassurance, and Megan stood awkwardly by the door, feeling very much like an intruder in her own home. Finally, the man pulled back, checked his mother over with critical eyes, then turned his full attention to Megan, and the intensity of his gaze made her feel pinned, cataloged, assessed in ways that were both intimidating and oddly thrilling. You're Megan Clark, he said, English perfect, voice deep and controlled. You found my mother last night, freezing on a bus bench, and you helped her. Yes, she needed help. Anyone would have done the same. No, he said flatly. They wouldn't have. Most people walk past her. Security footage from the convenience store shows at least 15 people saw her and kept walking before you stopped. Security footage. He'd already checked security footage. Megan filed that away as interesting and slightly concerning. Well, I stopped. She needed help. It's what you do. Megan crossed her arms, suddenly defensive under his scrutiny. You gave her your coat, bought her coffee with money you clearly don't have to spare, brought her to your home, gave her your bed, kept her safe through the night. He took a step closer, and Megan's heart rate kicked up. Why? Because she's a person who needed help. That's reason enough. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. You don't know who I am, do you? You're Helen's son. That's all I need to know. Helen laughed softly. Min Sung, she has no idea. I told you she helped without knowing. Min Sung. So that was his name. Park Min Sung, if he shared his mother's surname. My name is Dong Min Sung, he said formally. I run my family's business here in Chicago, and you, Megan Clark, saved my mother's life without knowing who she was, what I do, or what helping her might mean. That's extraordinary. It's really not. It's just human decency, which is apparently extraordinary in this city. His smile was slight but genuine. I owe you a debt, a significant one. Name what you need, and it's yours. Megan shook her head. I don't need anything. Your mom is safe. That's all that matters. You're standing in an apartment that costs you more than you can afford, wearing a uniform from a job that barely pays you enough to survive, and you spent your last money buying my mother coffee. He said it without judgment, just facts. Let me help you. It's the least I can do. How do you know what I can afford? Because I did my research. In the 20 minutes it took to get here, I learned everything about you, Megan Clark. 26 years old, social work degree from University of Illinois, working as a waitress at Sullivan's Diner because nonprofit jobs don't pay enough to live on. 73,000 in student loan debt, behind on rent by 2 months, sold your car last month to make ends meet. Anger flashed through Megan. You investigated me? I investigate everyone who enters my mother's life. It's necessary. He said it matter-of-factly, like privacy violation was just standard procedure. But what I found only makes me more grateful. You have nothing, and yet you gave everything to help her. I'm not looking for a reward. I know. That's why I want to give you one. Min Sung pulled out a card, held it out. This is my private number. Call me when you're ready to discuss how I can properly thank you. And Megan? His eyes held hers. I always repay my debts. Always, and he turned back to his mother, spoke in Korean, arranging to take her home, Megan assumed, and Helen hugged Megan tightly. Thank you, she whispered in English, for seeing me, for helping. You're special, Megan Clark. My son sees it too. Then they were gone, expensive car waiting downstairs, leaving Megan alone in her tiny apartment with a business card and a head full of questions. She looked at the card. Simple, elegant, embossed lettering, Dong Min, sung with a phone number. No title, no company name, nothing to indicate what his family business actually was. But something in the way he'd said it, the way his mother had warned her about his overwhelming gratitude, made Megan think this was more complicated than a simple thank you from a grateful son. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Miss Clark, this is James Park, Mr. Dong's assistant. I'm calling to inform you that your rent has been paid in full, both back payments and 6 months forward. Additionally, a car will be delivered to your address this afternoon, and your student loans have been transferred to a private account that requires no monthly payments until you're financially stable. Megan's world tilted. What? No, I didn't ask for any of that. Mr. Dong is aware. He's expressing gratitude for saving his mother's life. He also wanted me to inform you that a position has been created for you at Dong Community Services, a nonprofit he funds that does crisis intervention and support for vulnerable populations. The position is yours if you want it, salary commensurate with your education and experience. This is insane. I can't accept. Mr. Dong anticipated you might say that. He asked me to tell you that you're not accepting charity. You're accepting gratitude from a son whose mother would have died without your intervention, and that he hopes you'll at least consider the job offer, as your skills are genuinely needed. I need to think about this. Of course, Mr. Dong said to take all the time you need, but the rent is paid regardless, Miss Clark, and the loans are transferred. Those are gifts, not conditional on anything. Goodbye. What the hell had she gotten herself into? Megan stood frozen in her apartment for a full 5 minutes after the call ended, trying to process what had just happened. Rent paid, student loans handled, a car being delivered, a job offer doing actual social work instead of slinging coffee. It was too much, way too much. Nobody did things like this. Dropped life-changing money on a stranger just because of one night of basic human kindness? Except apparently Dong Min Sung did. She looked at his card again, noticed details she'd missed before. The quality of the paper? Heavy, expensive. The embossing so precise it must have cost a fortune. Everything about it screamed money and power. Her phone rang again. This time she recognized the number. Sullivan's Diner. Hey, Tommy, she answered, already knowing this wasn't going to be good news. Megan, I don't know what you did or who you pissed off, but some guys in expensive suits just came by asking questions about you. Real intense. Made everyone nervous. Her manager's voice was tight with stress. Look, I like you, but I can't have that kind of attention on my diner. I'm going to have to let you go. The unfairness of it hit like a physical blow. Tommy, I didn't do anything wrong. I helped someone who needed help. I believe you. But those guys, they weren't cops and they weren't friendly. And I got a business to protect. I'm sorry, Megan. I really am. I'll mail you your last check. He hung up before she could argue further. So now she was unemployed. Rent was mysteriously paid, but she had no income, no job, and apparently had attracted the attention of guys in expensive suits who scared her boss badly enough to fire her. Megan looked at Min Sung's card one more time, then made a decision. She dialed the number. He answered on the first ring. Megan, did you send people to my workplace to ask questions about me? A pause. I sent my security team to ensure you were safe and to gather background information. It's standard procedure. Well, your standard procedure just got me fired. My manager was so scared by your security team that he let me go over the phone. Anger made her voice sharp. So thanks for that. Silence. Then, I apologize. That wasn't my intention. I was trying to protect you, not harm you. Protect me from what? I helped your mother. That's it. I don't need protection. You don't understand what helping her means, what it makes you in the eyes of certain people. His voice was serious, weighted. Megan, there are people who would hurt you to get to me, who would see your kindness to my mother as an opportunity. I can't allow that. Can't allow it? You don't get to make decisions about my life. I get to make decisions about keeping you safe. That's non-negotiable. The certainty in his voice was both infuriating and oddly thrilling. Mr. Dong, Min Sung, please. Min Sung, I appreciate the gratitude. I do. But you can't just rearrange my life without asking. The rent, the loans, the job offer, it's too much. And now I don't even have my diner job because your people scared my boss. Then take the position at Dong Community Services. You're overqualified for waiting tables anyway. Use your degree. Do the work you train for. Working for you. Working for a legitimate nonprofit that helps people. I fund it, but I don't run it. You'd have complete autonomy in your position. Megan wanted to argue, but the truth was she'd been dying inside serving coffee when she had a degree in social work. The idea of actually using her training, helping people in crisis, doing meaningful work, it was everything she'd wanted. I need to think about it. Of course, but Megan, can we meet? In person? I'd like to explain things properly. Help you understand why I'm doing this. This feels like you're trying to control me. I'm trying to protect you. There's a difference. Please, have dinner with me tonight. Let me explain. After that, if you want nothing to do with me or my world, I'll respect that. But give me the chance to make you understand. Every logical part of Megan's brain screamed to say no. This man was clearly involved in something dangerous. His family business wasn't legitimate. The expensive suits, the security team, the way his mother had warned about his overwhelming gratitude all pointed to organized crime. But there was something in his voice, not just concern, but genuine care, and the memory of how he'd held his mother, the relief in his eyes when he'd seen she was safe, that had been real. One dinner, Megan heard herself say, somewhere public, and Min Sung, no more surprises, no more investigating me or rearranging my life. If we're going to have any kind of conversation, it needs to be honest. Honest, I can do honest. He sounded relieved. Tonight, 7 p.m. I'll send a car. I'll meet you there. Just text me the address. You don't have a car anymore. Then I'll take a cab. I'm not showing up in a car you sent. I need some independence here. A pause, then what might have been a smile in his voice. You're very stubborn. You're very pushy. 7 p.m. Text me the address. She hung up before he could argue, then immediately wondered if she'd just made a huge mistake. The restaurant was in River North, upscale but not ostentatious, the kind of place where deals were made over excellent food and better wine. Megan arrived exactly at 7, having used nearly her last money to pay for a cab, wearing the only nice dress she owned and feeling completely out of place. Min Sung was already there, standing when he saw her, and Megan's breath caught. He wore a dark suit, perfectly tailored, and when he smiled, genuine warmth breaking through his serious expression. He was devastating. Megan, thank you for coming. I'm here for answers, not for whatever this is. She gestured at the elegant private booth he'd secured. Then let me give you answers. He waited until she was seated before sitting across from her. What do you want to know? Let's start with the obvious. What's your family business? Min Sung studied her for a long moment, then said simply, my family controls significant operations in Chicago's Korean community. Import-export, real estate, entertainment venues. Some of it's legitimate, some exists in gray areas, and yes, some of it crosses legal lines. You're telling me you're a criminal. I'm telling you I run an organization that operates outside traditional legal frameworks, but we also protect our community, provide resources, support businesses that wouldn't survive otherwise. His voice was steady, unapologetic. It's complicated. That's one word for it. Megan leaned back. And your mother? Does she know what you do? She knows everything, hates parts of it, accepts others, loves me despite all of it. Something painful crossed his face. My father built this organization. When he died 4 years ago, the responsibility fell to me. I've been trying to transition us toward completely legitimate operations, but change takes time. And in the meantime, you do what? Hurt people? Intimidate them? I protect my people. I make sure our community is safe. Sometimes that requires methods that aren't strictly legal. He held her gaze. I won't lie to you, Megan. I've done things I'm not proud of, but everything I do is for a reason. That's what everyone says to justify bad choices. Perhaps, or perhaps sometimes the world isn't as black and white as we'd like it to be. He leaned forward. You studied social work. You did internships in crisis intervention. Tell me, did you always find that the legal system protected the people who needed it most? The question hit uncomfortably close. Megan had seen too many cases where the law failed vulnerable people, where bureaucracy got in the way of actual help, where people fell through cracks because they didn't fit neat categories. No, she admitted, the system fails people all the time. But that doesn't mean operating outside it is the answer, doesn't it? If the system fails, someone has to fill that gap. In our community, that someone is my family. His voice was passionate now, controlled fire. We provide jobs when legal businesses won't hire immigrants. We protect families from exploitation. We fund programs that help people the government ignores. Is that criminal? If you're breaking laws to do it, yes. Laws written by people who've never had to survive the way we have. Laws that protect the powerful and ignore the vulnerable. He sat back. I'm not asking you to agree with everything I do. I'm asking you to understand why I do it. Megan wanted to argue, but she'd seen enough of the world to know he wasn't entirely wrong. The system did fail people, and sometimes the people who helped most weren't the ones following every rule. Why are you telling me all this? Why be honest? Because you deserve honesty. And because, he paused, choosing words carefully. Because from the moment I walked into your apartment and saw how you'd taken care of my mother, not knowing who she was, not expecting anything, I knew you were someone special, someone I wanted in my life, and that means being honest about who I am. Heat flooded Megan's cheeks. You don't know me. I know you gave your last money to help a stranger. I know you brought someone you didn't know into your home because she needed safety. I know you worked a job you hated to stay afloat while your real passion sat unused. His eyes were intense. I know you're the kind of person who sees people in crisis and helps, even when it costs you everything. That's not special. That's just being decent. It's extraordinary. And Megan, I want to know more. Want to understand what shaped you into someone so determined to help others. Want to figure out if what I felt when I saw you could become something real. What you felt. Recognition. Connection. The sense that I'd found someone who might actually understand the contradiction of trying to do good through methods that aren't always good. He reached across the table, and Megan let him take her hand. I'm not a good man, but I want to be better. And something about you makes me believe that's possible. Megan should have pulled her hand away, should have stood up and walked out, should have protected herself from whatever dangerous attraction this was. Instead, she found herself saying, "Tell me about your mother, how she ended up lost last night." Relief flooded Min Sung's features. She was at a charity event downtown, one of her women's organizations. She does a lot of work with immigrant families, helping them adjust, providing resources. She left early, wasn't feeling well, and decided to take a cab home rather than wait for her driver. And someone stole her wallet? We're still investigating. It's possible it was random theft. It's also possible it was targeted, someone knowing who she was, taking advantage of a vulnerable moment. Do you have enemies who would target your mother? Yes, which is why I'm so grateful you found her first. If someone with less kind intentions had, he didn't finish, but Megan heard the fear underneath. She's safe now. That's what matters. Because of you. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. Megan, I know this is complicated. I know I've disrupted your life without permission. But please consider the job offer. Not because of me, but because you're genuinely needed. Dong Community Services does real work helping real people. Your skills would make a difference. And if I take it, what does that mean for this? She gestured between them. This, whatever this becomes, is separate from work. The job is yours because you're qualified and we need you. Anything personal between us develops on its own terms. No pressure, no expectations. You're very good at saying the right things. I'm good at being honest. There's a difference. He smiled slightly. Take the weekend. Think about it. Visit the center, meet the staff, see what we do. Then decide. If you say no, I'll respect that. But Megan, I really hope you say yes. They talked through dinner. 3 courses that Megan barely tasted. 2 caught up in conversation that ranged from serious to surprisingly funny. Min Sung had a dry wit that caught her off guard. A self-deprecating humor that seemed at odds with his dangerous reputation. He told her about raising his mother after his father's death, about the impossible balance of running an organization while ensuring she was protected and happy. She wants me to find someone, he said with a soft smile. Get married, have children, give her grandchildren. But my world isn't exactly conducive to normal relationships. Have you tried? Dating, I mean. A few times. But women either run when they learn what I do, or they're attracted to the power and money rather than me. He looked at her directly. You're the first person who's treated me like a regular person while knowing exactly who I am. Maybe because I don't care about your power or money. I care about whether you're good to your mother and honest with me. Then you care about the things that actually matter. His smile was warm. My mother likes you, by the way. She called me earlier, said you were exactly the kind of person she'd been praying I'd meet. She barely knows me. She knows you saved her life without hesitation. She knows you gave up everything to keep her safe. That's all she needs to know. He paused. She'd like to see you again. Properly thank you herself. Would you be willing to have tea with her this weekend? Min Sung, no strings attached, just tea. She wants to get to know the woman who helped her. And honestly, having my mother's approval means everything. If she likes you, which she clearly does, that's significant. Megan found herself agreeing, even as a voice in her head screamed that she was getting in too deep. But Helen had been kind, genuine, and Megan genuinely wanted to make sure she was okay. The evening ended too soon. Min Sung walked her outside where his car waited, a different one from this morning, equally expensive. Let me drive you home, he offered. It's late, and this neighborhood is fine. I can take a cab. Megan, please. I know you value independence, and I respect that. But let me do this. Let me know you got home safely. Something in his voice made her relent. She climbed into the car, and Min Sung settled beside her, maintaining careful distance but present. The drive passed in comfortable silence. When they reached her building, Min Sung walked her to the door. Thank you, he said, for giving me this chance, for listening, for not running when I told you the truth. I'm still processing the truth, Megan admitted. Still trying to figure out if this is smart or the stupidest thing I've ever done. Probably both, he smiled. But Megan, I meant what I said. About wanting to know you. About feeling something when I saw you. I don't take that lightly. Good. Because I don't either. She looked up at him. This dangerous, complicated man who looked at her like she was precious. I'll think about the job and the tea with your mother. But Min Sung, if we're going to do this, whatever this is, I need honesty. Complete honesty. No more surprises. Complete honesty, I promise. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles. Sleep well, Megan Clark, and thank you for everything. He left and Megan climbed the stairs to her apartment, head spinning with possibilities and warnings. She shouldn't see him again. Shouldn't even consider his job offer. Should put distance between herself and this world before she got in too deep. But as she lay in bed that night, she kept seeing Min Sung smile, kept hearing the genuine gratitude in his voice, kept thinking about the possibility of doing work that mattered, of being more than just a waitress marking time. Her phone buzzed. A text from Min Sung. Thank you for tonight. Sleep well. MS simple, sweet, completely devastating to her resolve. Megan typed back, thank you for dinner and for being honest. That means something. His response came immediately. Everything I told you was true, including the part about wanting to know you better. I'll wait as long as you need. Megan set her phone down, stared at the ceiling, and wondered if she was falling for someone who could either save her or destroy her. Time would tell. The next morning, Megan made a decision. She was going to visit Dong Community Services, see what they actually did, meet the people who worked there. Not because she decided to take the job, but because she needed to understand what she was considering. The center was in a renovated building in Chicago's Koreatown, 3 stories, modern but welcoming, with accessibility features and signs in multiple languages. Inside was bustling activity, families in the waiting area, staff members moving with purpose, the organized chaos of a place that actually helped people. Can I help you? A young Korean woman approached with a warm smile. I'm Jennifer Park, the assistant director. I'm Megan Clark. I was told to come by and see the facility. Jennifer's eyes lit up. Oh, you're Megan. Mr. Dong said you might visit. Welcome. Let me show you around. The tour was impressive. The ground floor housed drop-in services, legal aid, housing assistance, job placement, all available without appointments or complicated intake processes. We serve about 300 families a week, Jennifer explained. Most are recent immigrants or people who've fallen through cracks in the traditional system. The second floor held counseling rooms, meeting spaces, and a large community room where a group therapy session was in progress. Crisis intervention and ongoing support, Jennifer said. We have therapists on staff, but we're desperate for someone with your specific background, someone who understands trauma and crisis response. The third floor was administrative offices and a library with resources in multiple languages. And in the corner was an empty office with windows overlooking the street. This would be yours, Jennifer said, opening the door. If you decide to join us. Mr. Dong was very specific that you should have the best office in the building. Megan walked in, imagining it. Her space, her program, a chance to build something that actually helped people. What's it like, she asked. Working for Min Sung? Jennifer's expression was thoughtful. Honestly, he's the best boss I've ever had. He funds us completely, never interferes with operations, trusts us to do our jobs, and he genuinely cares about the staff, about the families we serve. This isn't a tax write-off for him. It's personal. Because of his mother? Partly. Mrs. Park does a lot of volunteer work here, but also because Mr. Dong remembers what it's like to struggle. His family came here with nothing, built everything from scratch. He hasn't forgotten that. They spent another hour discussing the position, responsibilities, salary, benefits. Everything was generous, professional, exactly what Megan had hoped for when she'd gotten her degree. Think about it. Jennifer said as Megan prepared to leave. We really need you. And between us, Mr. Dong specifically requested you. Not just because of what you did for his mother, but because he researched your academic work. Read your thesis on crisis intervention in immigrant communities. He thinks you're exactly what we need. He read my thesis, cover to cover, according to his assistant. Mr. Dong is very thorough when something matters to him, and apparently you matter. The words settled in Megan's chest, warm and terrifying. Tea with Helen Park happened on Sunday afternoon, at the penthouse Megan had heard about but never seen. A doorman who knew Helen by name let Megan up, and Helen herself answered the door, looking healthy and happy, and nothing like the frozen woman from that terrible night. Megan! Come in! Come in! Helen pulled her into a hug that felt genuinely warm. I'm so glad you came. The penthouse was stunning, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago, elegant furniture that somehow managed to feel comfortable, art that was probably worth more than Megan had earned in her entire life. But it was also clearly a home. Photos everywhere, Helen and Min Sung at various ages, family gatherings, moments of genuine happiness. This wasn't just a show place. People lived here, loved here. Min Sung's not here, Helen said, settling them in the living room with tea and delicate pastries. I thought you might appreciate just us. Girl talk, yes? Girl talk, Megan agreed, relieved and maybe slightly disappointed. They talked for hours. Helen told her about her life, coming to America with her husband 30 years ago, building a business from nothing, raising Min Sung in two cultures. It wasn't easy, she admitted. My husband's work was dangerous, but he provided for us, made sure Min Sung had every opportunity. Min Sung said you didn't approve of everything his father did. I didn't. I don't. Helen's expression was complicated, but I understood it. When systems fail you, when you're treated like you don't matter, you find other ways to survive. My husband did what he thought was necessary. Min Sung is trying to do better. Is he? Doing better? He's trying, transitioning the business toward legitimate operations, funding community programs, building things that actually help people. Helen reached over, took Megan's hand. He's a good man caught in a difficult situation, and I hope, meeting you might help him see a different path. Helen, I barely know him, but you see him, really see him. Not the reputation, not the money, not the danger. You see the person underneath. Her eyes were bright with hope. Do you know how rare that is? How lonely it is to be seen only for what you do, never who you are? Megan thought about that. Thought about Min Sung's eyes when he talked about wanting someone who saw past the surface, about the vulnerability under his controlled exterior. I'm scared, she admitted, of his world, of getting hurt, of making a mistake that cost me everything. Fear is wisdom, Helen said gently, but don't let it stop you from living. I was scared when I married Min Sung's father, scared of his world, scared of what it meant, but I loved him anyway. And yes, it was hard. Yes, there were moments I regretted it. But Megan, I also got Min Sung from that choice, and he's the best thing I ever did. You're telling me to give him a chance. I'm telling you to give yourself a chance, to do the work you're passionate about, to let yourself feel something instead of just surviving. Helen squeezed her hand. My son is complicated. His life is dangerous. But he's also kind, loyal, and so desperately lonely. And I think you might be exactly what each other needs. They talked until evening, and when Megan finally left, Helen hugged her tightly. Whatever you decide, thank you. For saving me. For seeing Min Sung as more than his reputation. For being exactly who you are. Megan made her decision on Monday morning. She called Jennifer Park at Dong Community Services and accepted the position. Not because of Min Sung, though she'd be lying if she said he wasn't part of it, but because it was the right move for her career, her passion, her life. Jennifer was ecstatic. This is wonderful. When can you start? 2 weeks. I need to wrap things up, get my apartment organized, prepare. Perfect. I'll have contracts sent over today. Megan, this is going to be amazing. You're going to do incredible work here. After the call, Megan sat in her apartment. Rent paid, student loans handled, life suddenly stable in a way it hadn't been in years, and felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. Her phone rang. Min Sung. She'd been expecting this call since Jennifer probably told him immediately. Congratulations, he said, voice warm. Jennifer tells me you accepted. I did. The work is important, and I'm qualified. It made sense. It made sense, he repeated, and she could hear the smile. Nothing to do with wanting to stay in Chicago? Near certain people? Don't push your luck. I wouldn't dream of it. A pause. Megan, I'm proud of you for taking the risk, for believing this could work, and I promise you won't regret it. I'm holding you to that promise. Good. Now there's something else. My mother's birthday is next weekend. She's having a small gathering, family, close friends. She asked me to invite you, and before you say no, she specifically said she wants you there. Her words, invite that wonderful girl who saved my life. I want to celebrate with her. Megan smiled despite herself. Your mother is very persuasive. She is. So is that a yes? It's a maybe. Text me details and I'll think about it. I'll take a maybe. His voice dropped, became more intimate. And Megan, I'm looking forward to working with you, to getting to know you better, to seeing where this goes. One step at a time, Min Sung. One step at a time, he agreed. But I'm an optimist. And something tells me those steps are leading somewhere good. They hung up and Megan looked around her apartment, at the life she'd built from nothing, at the future that suddenly looked brighter than it had in years. She'd spent her last penny helping a frozen old lady on a bus bench. And somehow that single act of kindness had changed everything, had given her a job she loved, a connection to people who valued her, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something that could be extraordinary, one step at a time. But those steps were definitely leading somewhere. And for the first time in years, Megan was excited to find out where. Helen's birthday party was everything Megan had feared, and nothing like she'd expected. The penthouse was filled with people, Korean families, business associates, friends who clearly loved Helen, and everyone was warm and welcoming. Min Sung stayed close, but not oppressively so, introducing her to people, making sure she felt included. And Helen was radiant, pulling Megan into conversations, introducing her as the wonderful young woman who saved my life. You're making me sound like a superhero, Megan protested. You are a superhero, Helen insisted, and Min Sung knows it. Look at how he watches you. Megan glanced over and found Min Sung across the room, eyes on her, expression soft with something that made her breath catch. Later on the balcony overlooking the city, Min Sung found her alone. Thank you for coming, he said, standing beside her. It means everything to my mother, and to me. Your mother is incredible. Everyone here clearly loves her. She's the heart of our family, always has been. He turned to face her. Megan, I know this is complicated. I know my world is dangerous and my life isn't what you probably imagined for yourself. But I need you to know, I'm serious about this. About you. We barely know each other. Then let's change that. Let me take you on actual dates. Let me show you who I am when I'm not being the head of a criminal organization. Let me prove that underneath everything, I'm just a man who wants to be with an extraordinary woman. Megan looked at him, this complicated, dangerous man who looked at her like she was his whole world. Okay, she said softly. Let's try. But Min Sung, I need honesty, complete honesty, and I need you to understand that I might not be able to handle your world, that this might not work. I understand. And Megan? He took her hand gently. If it doesn't work, if you decide this isn't for you, I'll let you go. I won't pressure you or try to control you. Your happiness matters more than what I want. You're saying all the right things again. I'm saying true things. There's a difference. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles. Thank you, Megan Clark, for giving me this chance, for being brave enough to try. Thank you for being worth the risk. They stood on that balcony, Chicago spread out below them, and Megan felt something shift. This wasn't just attraction or gratitude. This was the beginning of something real. Something that had started with a simple act of kindness on a frozen night. And as Min Sung smiled at her, genuine and warm and full of hope, Megan knew she'd made the right choice. Sometimes the best things in life started with spending your last penny to help someone who needed it. 3 months passed like a dream Megan kept waiting to wake up from. She started at Dong Community Services, threw herself into building the crisis intervention program, and discovered that doing work she loved made every day feel purposeful in a way she'd almost forgotten was possible. And Min Sung courted her properly. Not with expensive gifts, though those appeared anyway, much to her protests, but with time. Dinners where they talked for hours. Walks through Chicago neighborhoods where he showed her the community he was trying to protect. Quiet evenings at Helen's penthouse where the three of them cooked together and laughed like a family. "You're different with her," Helen observed one night when Megan was in the kitchen. Min Sung was on the phone in the other room, voice sharp with authority as he handled some business crisis. Softer, happier, more like the boy I remember before his father died. "He's different with you too," Megan said, chopping vegetables for the stew Helen was making. "The way he looks at you, like you're his whole world. I raised him alone after his father was killed. We only had each other for so long." Helen's eyes were distant with memory. "I worried he'd become too hard, too closed off. But then you appeared, and suddenly my son was smiling again, laughing, hoping for something beyond just survival. I'm not doing anything special. You're being yourself. That's the most special thing of all." Helen squeezed her hand. "Megan, I need to tell you something. Min Sung is planning to propose." Megan's knife clattered to the cutting board. "What?" "He hasn't said it directly, but I know my son. He's been looking at rings, asking about what I think you'd like, planning something romantic." Helen's smile was knowing. "And before you panic, I'm telling you this because I think you should be prepared, not surprised." "Helen, we've only been together 3 months. And how long did you need to know he was special? To feel something you've never felt before?" Helen's voice was gentle but firm. "Time is a construct, Megan. Connection is real. And what you two have, that's real." Megan's heart raced. Marriage. To a man who ran a criminal organization. To someone whose world was dangerous and complicated and nothing like what she'd imagined for herself. But also to someone who made her laugh. Who listened when she talked about her work. Who looked at her like she was precious. Who was trying every day to be better than his circumstances. "I don't know if I can say yes," she admitted quietly. "His world is so dangerous, Helen. What if something happens to him? What if I end up like you, raising a child alone because the man I love got killed? What if you spend your whole life playing it safe and miss out on the greatest love you'll ever know?" Helen countered. "Megan, I won't lie to you. Marrying into this family is hard. It's scary. There are nights I don't sleep, worrying about Min Sung. But I also wouldn't trade the years I had with his father for anything. And I wouldn't trade watching Min Sung become the man he is. A man who's trying to be better because he found someone worth being better for." Min Sung returned before Megan could respond. But Helen's words stayed with her through dinner, through the evening, through the drive home. At her building, she still kept her apartment, even though she spent most nights at Min Sung's place. He walked her to the door as always. "You're quiet tonight," he observed. "Everything okay?" "Just thinking." Megan looked up at him. "Min Sung, where do you see this going? Us, I mean." He studied her carefully. "Do you want the polite answer or the honest one?" "Always honest. I see marriage, children, growing old together, building a life that's more than just my family's business." His voice was steady, certain. "I see you as my wife, Megan, as the mother of my children, as the person I come home to every night for the rest of my life." "That's terrifying." "I know, but it's also true." He cupped her face gently. "I'm not asking you to decide tonight, but Megan, I need you to know, this isn't casual for me. You're not just someone I'm dating. You're my future, if you'll have me. Your mother told me you're planning to propose." Min Sung laughed, surprised and rueful. She wasn't supposed to tell you. I had this whole plan. I'm glad she did, because Min Sung, I need to think about this. Really think about what it means to marry you, to be part of your world. Something shifted in his expression. Fear, maybe, or worry. And, and I'm not saying no, but I'm not saying yes yet either. I need time to figure out if I can handle everything that comes with being your wife. Fair enough. He kissed her forehead softly. Take all the time you need. But Megan, I'm not going anywhere. And I'm not giving up on us. The proposal came 2 weeks later, and it wasn't what Megan expected. She was at the community center, running a group therapy session for domestic violence survivors, when Jennifer knocked on the door looking flustered. Megan, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there's an emergency. Mr. Dong needs you at the hospital immediately. Fear spiked through her. What happened? Is he hurt? Is Helen? Just go. He said to tell you it's urgent. Megan grabbed her coat and ran. The hospital was 10 minutes away. Traffic was terrible. And by the time she burst through the emergency room doors, she was panicking. Min Sung was there, standing in the waiting area, perfectly fine and healthy, and Megan wanted to kill him. You're not hurt, she said flatly. No. Sorry for the scare. He took her hands. But I needed to show you something, and I needed you to see it without warning, without time to prepare your professional mask. What are you talking about? He led her through corridors, past nurses who smiled knowingly, into a private wing she'd never seen before. And there, in a large, beautifully decorated room, was a woman Megan recognized from her group therapy sessions. Megan! The woman, Sophie, was crying but smiling. Look what Mr. Dong did! The room was full of Sophie's belongings. Her children were there, safe and happy, and standing beside them was Sophie's mother, who Sophie had told Megan lived in Korea and whom she hadn't seen in 5 years. I don't understand, Megan said. Sophie's mother, Min Sung explained quietly. You mentioned in passing that Sophie was struggling because she had no family support here, that her mother couldn't afford to visit from Korea. So I arranged it, paid for her visa, her flight, her accommodations. She's staying for 3 months. Tears flooded Megan's eyes. Sophie was hugging her mother, both of them crying, and the children were laughing with joy. Why would you do this? Megan whispered. Because you care about Sophie. Because she needed help. Because I can. Min Sung turned her to face him. Megan, this is what our life could be. Using resources I have to help people you see. Building something good together. Making a real difference. This is manipulation. You're showing me what you want me to see. I'm showing you the truth. This is who I want to be with you. Not the criminal, not the dangerous man everyone fears. Just someone who uses what he has to help people who need it. He dropped to one knee right there in the hospital corridor, pulled out a ring that was beautiful but not ostentatious, and Megan's breath stopped. Megan Clark, you spent your last penny to save my mother without knowing who she was. You've shown me what it means to care about people more than power. You've made me want to be better than I am. His voice was steady despite the emotion in his eyes. I'm not a perfect man. My life is complicated and dangerous. But I love you. Completely. Irrevocably. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving that loving me isn't a mistake. Will you marry me? Megan looked at him. This impossible man who just reunited a mother and daughter because she'd mentioned it once. Who remembered details she barely remembered sharing. Who was kneeling in a hospital corridor proposing marriage while Sophie cried happy tears in the background. Your life is dangerous, she said. It is. I might end up widowed young. I'm doing everything I can to transition out, to make the business legitimate. It'll take time, but I'm committed. Your mother might be the only reason I'm saying yes. Min Sung smiled through tears that were forming in his eyes. I'll take it. Is that a yes? It's a terrified, probably stupid, definitely insane yes. She pulled him up and kissed him, feeling him smile against her lips. But yes, I'll marry you, Dong Min Sung. I'll marry you and probably regret it, and definitely love you anyway. He slipped the ring on her finger, lifted her off her feet, spun her around while Sophie cheered and nurses applauded, and Megan laughed through happy tears. Thank you, he whispered against her hair. Thank you for taking the risk, for believing we could work. Thank you for being worth the risk. They were married 4 months later in a ceremony that blended Korean tradition and Southern Baptist warmth. Megan's mother and aunts flew in from Atlanta, initially suspicious of this Korean man their baby was marrying, but won over by Min Sung's quiet respect and obvious love. He's good to you, Megan's mother said as they prepared for the ceremony. I can see it. The way he looks at you, like you're his whole world. He is. And Mama, I know his life is complicated, but he's trying to be better. For me. For us. That's all we can ask. That our partners try to be better. Her mother adjusted Megan's veil, eyes bright with tears. Your grandmother would be so proud. You found someone who values your kindness, who sees your strength. The ceremony was beautiful. Helen cried through the entire thing. Min Sung's voice shook when he said his vows. And when they kissed as husband and wife, Megan felt something settle in her chest, certainty that whatever came next, they'd face it together. The first year of marriage was an adjustment. Min Sung was true to his word about transitioning the business, but change was slow and dangerous. There were nights he came home tense with stress, mornings when his phone rang with crises that pulled him away. But there were also quiet evenings cooking together, weekends visiting Helen, moments of pure joy when they forgot about the dangerous world and just existed as husband and wife. I want a family, Megan said one night as they lay in bed. Children. But Min Sung, I'm scared. What if something happens to you? What if I end up raising them alone? Then you'll raise them the way my mother raised me, with strength and love and the certainty that their father loved them more than anything. He pulled her close. But Megan, I'm being careful. I'm building legitimate businesses, stepping back from dangerous operations. In 5 years, maybe less, I'll be completely clean. Promise? I promise. Because I want that family too. Want to see you pregnant with my child. Want to be a father. Want to build something that lasts. 6 months later, Megan took a test that showed 2 pink lines, and their world shifted again. Pregnancy was harder than Megan expected. Morning sickness that lasted all day, exhaustion that made work challenging, and constant worry about bringing a child into Min Sung's complicated world. But Min Sung was extraordinary. He held her hair when she was sick, rubbed her feet when they swelled, talked to her, growing belly in Korean and English, telling their baby about the family they were joining. You're going to be loved, he whispered to her stomach. So loved. By your Iyama, who's the strongest person I know. By your Halmione, who can't wait to spoil you. By me, who will do everything to give you a better world than the one I grew up in. Helen was overjoyed. A grandchild. Finally. She immediately began preparing, buying baby clothes, setting up a nursery in the penthouse, planning for the future. Your mother is going to spoil this baby rotten, Megan observed. Absolutely. And I'm going to let her. Min Sung kissed Megan's forehead. She deserves this joy. After everything she's been through, she deserves to be a grandmother. Their daughter was born on a snowy February morning, exactly 1 year after Megan had found Helen freezing on that bus bench. They named her Grace Hei Jin Dong, Grace for the grace that had brought them together, Hei Jin for the grandmother who'd made it all possible. Min Sung cried when he held her for the first time. She's perfect. She's absolutely perfect. She looks like you, Megan said, exhausted but happy. She has your strength. I can feel it. He looked at Megan with eyes full of love and wonder. Thank you. For this. For her. For believing we could have this. Grace was 6 months old when Min Sung came home one evening with an announcement. It's done, he said, gathering Megan and Grace in his arms. I'm out, completely out. The transition is complete. Everything is legitimate now. 2 years later, their son was born. Daniel Minjun Dong, named for Megan's late father and Min Sung's. And their family was complete. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Min Sung ran his legitimate business empire. Megan expanded Dong Community Services into 3 locations across Chicago. Helen was the most devoted grandmother imaginable, spending countless hours with Grace and Daniel, teaching them Korean and cooking with them and spoiling them absolutely rotten. I can't believe this is my life, Megan said one evening, watching Min Sung chase giggling children through their living room. They'd moved from the penthouse to a real house, one with a yard where kids could play, in a neighborhood that was safe and warm. What life did you imagine? Helen asked, sitting beside her. Not this. Not this level of happiness. Not this much love. Megan leaned against Helen's shoulder. That night I found you. I was at my lowest. Broke, exhausted, convinced my life would never be more than just surviving. And then you appeared, and everything changed. You changed everything by being exactly who you are. Helen squeezed her hand. You saved my life, yes. But Megan, you also saved Min Sung's. Gave him a reason to be better, a future worth building. We saved each other. Min Sung appeared then, Daniel on his shoulders, Grace holding his hand. Iyama says it's time for the story, Grace announced. At 4 years old, she was already bilingual, switching between English and Korean with ease. What story? Megan asked. The story of how you and Appa met. Grace climbed onto the couch between Megan and Helen. Hal Mione says it's a special story. Min Sung settled on the floor with Daniel, looking up at Megan with eyes full of love. It is special. Should we tell them? So they did. They told their children about a frozen February night, about a woman who gave her last penny to help a stranger, about kindness that changed everything. Your Iyama is a hero, Min Sung said, looking at his children with serious eyes. She saved Hal Mione's life without knowing who she was, just because it was the right thing to do. And your Appa learned to be a hero too, Megan added. He decided to be better, to build a life worth living, to choose love over everything else. Grace looked between her parents with wide eyes. So you fell in love because Emma was kind? I fell in love because your karma is extraordinary, Min Sung corrected gently. Because she sees people who need help and doesn't walk away. Because she's brave and strong and taught me what really matters. And I fell in love because your Appa tried so hard to be better, Megan said. Because he loved his mother enough to change his whole life. Because underneath everything, he was good. That's romantic, Grace declared. Like a fairy tale. Better than a fairy tale, Helen said. Because it's real. And you too, Grace, Daniel, you're the happy ending that came from one night of simple kindness. That night, after the children were asleep, Min Sung found Megan on their bedroom balcony, looking at the Chicago skyline. Thank you, he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. For what? For spending your last penny that night, for taking the risk, for believing I could be better than I was. He kissed her temple. For giving me this life, these children, this extraordinary family. I didn't give you anything. We built this together. You gave me hope. That was everything. He turned her to face him. I love you, Megan Dong. More than I thought it was possible to love someone. I love you too, even though you're still occasionally infuriating. Occasionally, he laughed. You're generous. They stood there wrapped in each other, and Megan thought about that frozen February night 5 years ago. About the choice to stop instead of walking past. About spending $12 she couldn't afford on coffee for a stranger. That single choice had led to everything. The job, the love, the family, the life she'd never imagined was possible. Do you ever regret it? Min Sung asked quietly, like he could read her thoughts. Helping my mother that night? Everything that came after? Megan looked up at him. This man who'd started as a dangerous criminal and become her husband, her partner, the father of her children. Not for a single second, she said firmly. Every difficult moment, every scary decision, every risk, it was all worth it to end up here. With you, with our family. Even when I'm infuriating? Especially then, she kissed him softly. Because Min Sung, you're not perfect, but you're perfect for me. And that's all that matters. Inside, they could hear Grace singing Daniel to Sleep, a Korean lullaby Helen had taught her, slightly off-key but full of love. And standing on that balcony, with Chicago glittering below and their family safe inside, Megan understood something profound. Kindness wasn't just about the single moment of helping, it was about all the moments that followed. The ripples spreading outward, touching lives, building futures, creating love where there was none before. She'd spent her last penny to help a frozen old lady, and in return, she'd received everything.